Well, welcome everybody. I hope that everyone is staying dry in this very wet afternoon in Columbus, Ohio. Um, my name is Gina Ginn, and I am the CEO for Columbus Early Learning Centers. And today I will be joined by three amazing moms who are here to talk with us and share with us a little bit about COVID's impact on moms. This is, for those of you that don't know, although I think you do because you registered through United Way, but this is United Way's Mother's Day event. It's COVID's impact on moms, and it's a part of the Learn United series designed to highlight the narratives of a variety of voices in our community. And today we're going to explore the impact of COVID on moms, their resiliency, and the work and programs to support them. So as we get started and as we start to introduce our panelists, I just wanted to start by saying, you know, if you look and Google COVID's impact on moms, it returns 72,100,000 results of writings that have been done over the last year plus of how COVID has impacted moms. And that stretches from the Brookings Institute to Fortune to the New York Times to even small papers. I found an article in Northwest Iowa that talk about, and many academic journals that talk about the impact of COVID on moms and how it has seemed to disproportionately impact women, and especially women of color. So when we get started today, if each of the panelists could just introduce themselves, what work they do in the community, and why they decided to say yes to being on this panel today. Liz, do you want to go first?
Sure, absolutely. Thank you so much to United Way for hosting this really important conversation. I am a city council member in Columbus and also a mother. I have 3 children. They are 5, 3, and 4 months, and they keep us very busy. I am going to caveat that I hope my audio is coming through okay. Okay, good, because I'm in an empty room. We just moved this weekend. Parenting is full of surprises, and I feel like it's echoing, so I'm glad it's good. So I wanted to be a part of this conversation because of my personal experience as a mother, of course, but really also because of my experience on Columbus City Council, fighting for, I hope, always fighting for parents and mothers and women. COVID has been an extraordinarily challenging time for basically any caretaker. And I do think that moms have a special place in that, in sort of the challenges of COVID. I think back to a year ago, and that vulnerability I felt most acutely, really, than I had ever experienced. That vulnerability of, am I going to keep my family safe? How do I do that? Are my parents going to stay safe? Is my community going to stay safe? And how will I make all these things work together? That intense vulnerability that I felt a year ago, I sat back and reminded myself that the very same vulnerability so many people were experiencing are actually the same vulnerability that a lot of women had before COVID. And I think that's what makes this conversation so important, that women in our city and around the world already faced an uneven playing field before the pandemic. My personal experience with it, of course, helped me feel that more intensely personally. But this conversation is important because COVID blew that uneven playing field wide open further. So that's what I'm excited to dig into today. And the last thing I will say is that if you want to understand the strength and health of a city, of a state, of a nation, you start by asking yourself the question, how healthy are its women? And that's why focusing in on this today is the best way to celebrate Mother's Day.
Twinkle, do you want to go next, and then we'll loop in Nichole?
Sure, I would love to. Hi, I'm Twinkle Schottke, Director of Moms to Be. I get to work with moms that are pregnant in the highest risk area and help them have a healthy baby. The moms stay in the program until they're 1. What I can say about moms over this time of COVID and everything we've been through is that I get to work with some of the most resilient people in the community. All we've been through with COVID, we each have experienced it differently. And then imagine being pregnant during this time, and then imagine being isolated and maybe having lack of transportation. All of us had lack of access to resources and supplies, lack of access to food. Despite that, we've made it through these 15 months and we're still going strong. So I'm thrilled to get to be here to celebrate Mother's Day, to talk a bit about mothers. I'm a mom. I have 2 adult children, Kaylee and Gavin, keeping them safe over this time, hearing about the struggles that different families have been going through, and just figuring out on a daily basis what's best for my family and then what's best for the families we serve. And it has been a challenge, but thankfully we've made it this far.
Nichole, if you'd like to start by just introducing yourself and then why you decided to join the panel today.
Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Nicole Harris, and I'm the Director of Programs at the Center for Healthy Families. And we work specifically with pregnant and parenting youth. And our goal was to help our pregnant and parenting teens really get to their next best, improve the lives that they are leading. And I decided to join this panel definitely because I'm a mom of 2, a 19 and 14-year-old, and I sent my daughter away to college 300 miles away in the middle of a pandemic. And so all of the worry that you have with your daughter being so far away, and she just got home Sunday, and so it was a successful year, but it was a hard year. And then working with the young women that we work with, just imagine how difficult that is. Our age group is 12 to 24. So from early adolescence to mid-adulthood, and all of the barriers that they experience, just like Twinkle was talking about, the lack of transportation, lack of basic needs. We found that housing has been a great disparity for this group of women. So being able to share their stories and their experiences and hope to move the needle forward. So definitely thank you guys for inviting the Center for Healthy Families today.
Thanks for being here, Nichole. So I wanted to start our discussion by talking a little bit about a recent Fortune article that was written by Allison Corbin. She wrote, "Women are in the fight of their lives as we run the risk of unraveling decades of progress for women in our society and communities." With that, and I feel like we'll start by maybe everybody taking this question. How has the pandemic affected the mothers and families that you work with? And what did, if any of you experienced closures or having to change your programming or change how you do things in the community, what effect did that have on the women that you work with as well? Twinkle, do you want to start?
Sure, I'd love to. So as you know, Moms to Be is a face-to-face meeting. It's a group, it's a relationship based, it's all hands-on. Before COVID, I call that BC, we touched and we hugged and we were in each other's space and we held the babies and we watched growing bellies. And this was a time that we shared together weekly. I use the term CPR, consistent, predictable, reliable. We were there every single week. You could always count on us in each of the 8 neighborhoods in Columbus. And you knew that without fail, this was going to happen. And then COVID closed all of us. We panicked because we didn't know how we were going to continue to serve moms without being with them. We didn't know we could take this program virtually. And without COVID, we would have never been able to experience what we have now. The fear of losing contact with our moms was a constant daily meeting. There were constant meetings about what can we do. So we too started with Facebook Live and we started filming short clips, but it just wasn't enough because we wanted the interaction. We wanted to have the give and take. We wanted the questions. We wanted to be with the moms. So we started weekly Zooms and we got up to 13 Zooms per week. So we had moms for pregnant mom Zooms, we had parenting mom Zooms. We have a dads to be program. We had dads to be Zooms. And because we wanted to be with our babies, we started baby Zoom. And so we partnered with Kinder Music and the Nichole Center, and we have mom and baby. And to think that you could do this model of care over Zoom is almost unreal. We have new mom Zooms every week where we meet moms and tell them exactly what we do and how we do it, because this is a voluntary program. You don't have to be a part of it, but once the moms kind of get connected, they don't unconnect. And now we're planning to go back in person. So as we do all the safeguards that we need to put in place to keep all of us safe, we also will keep the virtual Zoom, because for some moms it works. And having the ability to have a choice, or if you do go to work and you're running late or there's transportation's an issue, this is one more way that we can interact. Now, you are going to ask about access to technology, and I know that. And it's hard. And not everyone has access to technology. So having a phone or a tablet to get online, having the access to internet, having the ability to be able to make that connection and then follow the prompts to be able to mute and unmute. We still have problems with that. We've been doing this over a year and we struggle. So teaching moms how to be present virtually has been a challenge. And then making sure that everyone has access to technology has also been a challenge. We've made great strides in that. We're to a point where we received some CARES Act money. We were able to purchase iPads that have the 4G in them so that the moms that are pregnant can access those. And then as their baby turns 1, they'll be turned off and they'll return them and we'll give them to the next mom. So has it been easy? No. But where there's a will, there's a way. And we knew we couldn't stop because the babies are still being born and they're still being born healthy. And so for that, we're very grateful.
Nichole, would you like to share next?
Yes, to piggyback off what Twinkle was stating, we had to pivot. You know, when you think about how you plant your foot and you're pivoting, like we just really had to come up with a great pivot plan for our participants. And we also use technology. We looked at what would be the best platform for that. And so we are now on a Clara, and it's through a text. They can text on it. They can do virtual visits. They can leave messages for our staff, because just like Twinkle was saying, that human contact when you're visiting with moms in their homes, you're meeting them at their doctor's appointments, you're helping them get to the grocery store, or even taking them to appointments such as Social Security or getting their documents. When the pandemic hit, we could not that in-person service just due to safety reasons. We did a lot of material assistance drop off to make sure they had masks and they had hand sanitizer, diapers and wipes and things that they needed for their children, and just being able to really stay connected with them. We also had a school program that schools were now virtual, Zoom or synchronous. And so still connecting with those professionals to engage with those moms was very important to us. So I think we've tried to use green space initially. So if it's at a park or even outside with a lawn chair, just to get creative. We put some kits together for moms so they could have blankets out with their babies and lawn chairs and different activities, just so they wouldn't feel socially isolated. So it definitely has been a learning curve. And like Twinkle was saying, you find that technology has kept us together, but there's that divide where if they don't have internet, or they at a library sitting with their phone, you know, have they had to go to their family's house, but now with COVID, they're not in their bubble. So just really getting creative with technology and still having that physical connection with our participants. So I think, you know, we've had some lessons learned, and definitely just continuing to, you know, document our learnings and be able to, work with our families, even though we're in our, I guess, pandemic still.
And Gina, I'll jump in now. You know, from the city's perspective, we are so grateful for organizations like Center for Healthy Families and Moms to Be, who have incredible leadership that can pivot. And that is an important thing to fundamentally the question that the city has been trying to answer since COVID hit, which is, how are we doing, right? How do we recover? How do we actually find a better new normal, better than what we were facing, what many families were facing before the pandemic? So you ask about how sort of we were affected, and I really take that to mean how were women across Columbus affected? And so I want to just kind of hark back to some of my opening comments and set the stage a little bit more concretely with some numbers. The crisis of care that we're facing now is not new for many low-income parents, low-income women, and the pandemic has just spread the problem to more families and made it more acute. There is a unique stress to navigating a pandemic that kind of changes that feeling I talked about of vulnerability that every family has to navigate. But in 2019, just to give you a sense of Columbus, 1 in 4 women were considered financially insecure in Columbus, with women of color disproportionately struggling. That's a lot of women. That's a quarter of our women. And so many women are primary caretakers, if not single heads of household. That was before the pandemic. McKinsey and Company did a study on global employment. That 39% of global employment was made up of women, but in the pandemic, women account for 54% of overall job losses. And that really gives me a sense, and those numbers generally track, down to Columbus. Women did make up a larger share of employment, larger than 39%, but are bearing the brunt of these job losses because sort of 2 things are happening when women are suffering job losses right now and general financial insecurity. First and foremost, the virus increased the burden of unpaid care, right? Which is all the care we do in our homes, not just for our children, but for our parents, for our siblings. Women often provide care cross-generationally. They disproportionately carry that burden. But at the same time, women are disproportionately represented in industries impacted the most by COVID. So service sector industries are what the industries that were hit the worst by the pandemic for reasons we all know, right? If you can't do that in-person connection, the industry suffers. And so women in our city right now are dealing with 2 things at once. Probably more financial insecurity and probably more demands at home to provide caregiving. So that's very destabilizing. And when I think about how we have to act as a city to find that new normal, find a better normal post-COVID, it's keeping in mind, this really lopsided teeter-totter that women are on right now across our city. What actions can we take to restore the balance, or maybe find the balance for the first time for many women in our city?
Yeah, and I think too, to just add a little bit of perspective, Twinkle and Nichole deal a lot with moms in that first year. And so our organization, as many of you know, Columbus Early Learning, we work with kids 6 weeks to 5. And we, as a childcare organization, didn't close during the pandemic. So we've been open and operating in person, having to take really extraordinary steps and measures to ensure the safety of not only the kids that we serve, but their own families, and as well as the staff that work for us. So that also has been a dynamic of, Liz, you talk about, the level and disproportion of care. Those parents who are those frontline workers who were in the service sector, who couldn't stay home, right, and be protected from the virus and had to be in the workforce. All of the childcare programs that stayed open ended up being that lifeline for parents. And we did learn too, Twinkle, that, we can do pretty extraordinary things with technology. Our kids, a lot of them are in speech therapy, and we have different art programs, and we were able to introduce those back into the classrooms via Zoom, as well as our home visiting programs did move to being online and virtual. But I think, the biggest piece, going back to Liz's point about care and access to it, so many families don't have that access or didn't have the appropriate access to care because of smaller class sizes that we were required to have, the operating hours, all of those different things that now we're starting to, as a community, bear the brunt of the impact of that, as well as closures. We've had many of our childcare programs in our community close permanently. And so there will be and continues to be that struggle in our community too, is having access to quality and affordable childcare. And so I just want to make sure that we also don't lose sight of that as part of this ongoing conversation, because as the babies that Twinkle and Nichole take such good care of need childcare, many of them come to us. We have to have room for these babies, right? And we have to be able to provide those services to them. And moms need to be able to afford it or have the supports from our community to be able to bring them to these programs that are right there in the communities where we live. So that kind of starts the conversation about equity, and that there isn't equity in our community. There isn't the same access for families who are low income or maybe aren't working right now. They have been they have exited the workforce because of that increased level of care. So in that, what is, for all of you, why are there still these inequities in the system? I know all of you are champions of trying to make a more just and fair system, but how do we do that? And why do we still think that those inequities exist for women? Nichole, do you want to take that first? Or Liz, go ahead. Yeah.
Sorry, I was going to jump in with a pretty simple answer. The reason that inequities still exist is that we haven't prioritized fixing them. We just never have prioritized fixing them. And this is a centuries old problem. When you look at gender equity, when you look at racial equity, we as a country have never taken it seriously that it is our responsibility, it starts with us, to fix these problems. And I hope that, frankly, the catastrophe that COVID has presented us has forced the conversation towards action on fixing these inequities. And I think about the uprisings last summer, and the George Floyd's murder obviously was the catalyst for that. But I do think that the anxiety of last spring in the way that COVID hit us and the vulnerability people felt was actually a part of having that catalytic moment. Why people took to the streets, because people knew that that COVID wasn't affecting everyone equally. This is folks have called this the she session, right? We know that COVID deaths hit the Black and brown community the hardest. Infection rates hit the Black and brown community the hardest. When you look at we talk about those industries that are hit hardest by COVID and that women disproportionately hold those roles. We're really talking about Black and brown women primarily. And, simultaneously not having the kind of care they need for their kids that they rely on in typical times, as imperfect as that was in typical times. And then suddenly being expected to show up for work and figure out your kids, or get fired because your restaurant shut down and figure out your kids, right? It really blows your mind to absorb that inequity. And I think that's part of those demands in the streets last summer. And I think that it's up to all of us to answer that call. It's part of this conversation. Why are women and mothers in particularly suffering disproportionately from COVID? And it's up to all of us to answer that call. And I could spend a really long time talking about, I think, some of the policies that we need to do that, but I don't want to monopolize the conversation. So I'm going to let the other women talk. And Gina, you just let me know if we want to come back to that.
I agree with everything Elizabeth said. We've been in crisis for a very long time. And unfortunately, our community hasn't valued women and babies and us getting to our next best. And so I'm hoping that this has sounded the alarm and gives us an opportunity to really do something different they say the definitions of insanity is doing the same thing and expecting to get a different result. And so hoping that this will be our opportunity to do something different for our community. And like Elizabeth said, everyone taking some individual responsibility to be the change that we want to see, and continuing to have conversations such as this, to put it out on the forefront and have those conversations. I wish there was a magic wand that I could pull out and it would be all better, but it's going to really take us getting our hands dirty and having a voice and marching and standing up for women, because as we birth the world, right? And what no better place than for us to be valued where we should be. So yeah, that's my 2 cents.
So when I think about inequities and I think about the beginning of the pandemic, each and every one of us were struggling to get basic requirements. And by that, I mean toilet paper, soap. Then we learned about masks, but there were no masks. So we had all of these panics. And then if you were able to get to the grocery store, maybe in your own community, there was nothing on the shelves. So the shelves were bare. So you had to either go early or you had to try a different store. And that's for those of us who had a car, who were able to get there, who were able to purchase these items, because items like that are not even covered on SNAP. So they're not food related. So when our moms started and they said, we need toilet paper, we need a hand sanitizer, we need spray, disinfectant. Those are the first things when we looked at inequities that we could see. And then the bus. So the bus was running at a limited schedule, but in order to get on, you had to have a mask. Well, we didn't have masks. There were no masks to be had. And so trying to figure out who we could partner with. And this is all about our community. This is not happening somewhere else. This is happening right here. So what could people do? Anyone do? Is just help one person. How could we partner? If you're in a group, it could be a book club. It doesn't even matter what kind of club. Could you do donations? Could you collect diapers? Could you do a theme for Mother's Day? Anything that you do will help these highest risk moms. And they're our moms. They're raising our babies. This is our community. So it isn't someone else's, it's ours. And when we say it's us and what can we do, instead of saying, oh, that doesn't happen around here, let's first acknowledge it. And second, let's put legs to it. And if you don't know what to do, call any one of us, because we have a whole list of things that we need done. And we love partners. We love new partners. And some people like to give tangible things. They like to collect things or put them together. Other people just are really not sure. But even if you wanted to mentor a mom, because it's hard for all of us as moms, we all want to be the best mom we could possibly be. But think about being a mom and being pregnant, and then not having just food and basic essential items, and then having a school ager, and then needing to do school, but maybe school was hard for you. So there are so many compound levels that we learned about early on. How could we provide mentor support for school? And then if there was a childcare center and it was open, then could you get your child there? And then could you also get to work? So when we hear all of the things our moms have been through, and over 15 months, we figured a lot of this out, but some of this, the gap is so wide, it's gonna take more than this to help us close that.
Twinkle, it was like you were reading my mind. Great segue. Now that we are 15 months into this, what are people now starting to express as their biggest needs and concerns, and how do we start to address that within our community?
I think housing, it continues to be the biggest need. Before they may have been doubled up, and now they're quadrupled. So it's families of 12 and 18 who are living in quarters with COVID going on. Just like Twinkle said, the material assistance is it's enormous need, to make sure that families, when they are in the community, can be safe. We were in purple a few weeks ago, so definitely making sure they have those material items that they need. And I think safety, the community violence that we have been experiencing, we've had several of our participants who knew people who've been unfortunately murdered, or they've been their family members, and then just the toxic stress of living this, and the exacerbated mental health, has been difficult. There's a wait list everywhere. We've sounded the alarm to say, get mental health, take self-care, but the providers are overstressed and taxed to be able to provide that service. And I'm sure, intimate partner violence has went up as well. So with all of that, it's just been a hard way for our moms to be able to just the day-to-day and just, reassuring them that there is support through us and other agencies in the city. And like you said, Gina, with your childcare, just that community, that network, wrapping their arms around them to say, hey, if I don't have it, but Gina may have it, let me call Twinkle, let me contact the city and see what can be done to meet the needs of these families. It's a long list and it keeps getting longer every day.
Yeah, I think that's exactly right. I totally agree with Nicole. And the way that I think about it really is, COVID, kind of back to that teeter-totter analogy, really knocked a lot of women off balance, a lot of parents off balance. So, you fall off the teeter-totter and you might dislocate a shoulder or something, right? Well, it doesn't magically get easier to hang on when you get back on the teeter-totter because you got a broken shoulder. So, so many of the things that that we know our families struggled with pre-pandemic and during the pandemic are still really at the core of what they're facing. So housing is absolutely, I think, foundational for creating security, encouraging financial security for families. We found at the city that our rent assistance program was, just overextended, right? I mean, everybody really needed help, and we know that help is continued because when you lose your paycheck, you may not get it back, or when you do find a new job, it may not pay the same amount. So people are continuing to face these challenges in rent and utility. And so the city has assistance programs for both of those things. One thing we also put into place that I was really proud to work with the Columbus Urban League on is the Right to Recover program, which essentially recognizing that low-income workers were vulnerable to contracting COVID because they often had to show up to work. Recognizing that they were also the least able to then take time off of work to recover, we began a program that provides emergency financial relief to help people with a positive diagnosis actually take that time off work, not have to choose between their paycheck and their rent or their paycheck and their child's medicine, to isolate and recover before returning to their job. And you talk about equity, and we know that the infection rate in Columbus has consistently been around 4 times higher for Latinx residents than white residents, around twice as high for Black residents when compared to white residents. So programs like Right to Recover, I think, are part of this equity solution. Since its inception in November, the Right to Recover program, again, emergency cash financial assistance, has aided about 800 low-income workers, and 79% of those recipients were people of color. So I think it's an important thing to remember that if we want people to be able to get back to their new normal, we've all got to band together and figure out whatever we can do in our community to make it happen. But we also have to simply provide people resources. When you give mothers resources to parent, that is the best dollar you can spend, because she's going to make a really good choice with that dollar. She knows what her family needs. And I'm very encouraged by the American Rescue Plan and the new child tax credit, the expanded child tax credit, which is larger now, $3,000 per child, $3,600 per child if they're under 6, excuse me, and also refundable. So we're actually meeting the needs of low-income families. Those kinds of investments are how we get at your equity question, Gina, or how we solve that equity problem, by giving families resources, not telling them what we think they need, but giving them resources to empower themselves.
Well, I have to echo I just can't even, it's like talking out of the same mouth, because housing is huge for us. It's always, always, always a challenge. And like Liz says, we're not going to tell someone what to do. We ask, what do you need? And if you ask, people know what they need, and they've tried everything before they ask you. People are proud. The moms we work with, they don't want to be asking for help. They really want to do it on their own, but sometimes it's really hard. And getting housing, you need to have an income. And if you've lost your job, or you can only work between the hours that your child's in school, there are so many limits to this that you have to have so many months paycheck stubs to show, and they don't have that right now. And there's help wanted ads everywhere all over the city. And well-meaning people say to me, well, why don't your moms work there? And I'm thinking, how are they going to get there at those hours and do what? So let's be realistic in saying that the needs of the community are vast, that what is available is huge. However, you have to be able to have your family taken care of before you can go outside your home to find the piece of employment or the piece that will help make your family whole. When we think about COVID and the moms or the babies who have had COVID, they tell us to isolate. It's very hard to isolate when you don't have a 10-day food supply. It's very hard to isolate if you needed Tylenol and you have to stay in your home, but someone needed to run and get it and there is no someone. So the things that maybe you take for granted because there's supports in your life, our moms don't always have that. And then you want to ask questions about why they missed work. Well, you can't do it all. People are trying to do the best they can, but we can't judge someone else for the way you think something should be done. We ask what moms need, and then we do everything in our power to get the resources to help them get there.
Sorry, my mute would not unmute. And I think too, Twinkle, that's a good bridge to something I've also been thinking about through this, is that many of our moms are the people that work for us too, right? So they reflect the populations that we serve, and they are also needing additional supports because maybe that other person in their household didn't, has lost their job, or their daughter lost their job. Nichole talked a lot about multi-generational households living together. And if all of those other people have lost their jobs and the only person that kept their job is the person who is working in the human services sector or in a frontline service industry job, those families are struggling just as much, and their needs have been, I think, exacerbated. So I think for us, not only are we seeing that our families have greater need, and what we've done is, we've tried to start bringing all of that to them. So if they need food, they pick it up when they pick up their child. If they need household supplies, they pick it up when they pick up their child, right? So that we're trying to bring all of that to one place so that they only have to worry about getting to one place. Because I think something too that, our community is vast and it has vast resources, but you have to be able to have access to those resources. And if you don't have transportation, if you are working in an hourly job, you have to take time off that job. And if you were sick, to Liz's point, they're not going to give you any more time off to go to the food pantry or to get utility assistance or to get rental assistance. And so as much of those services that we can as a community wrap around people where they already are and where they go every day, I think is a really important learning that I hope so many people have taken away from this last year. Because most food pantries are only open from 9 to 11 a.m. If you're working, you can't get there. So we bring the food to you, right? Like, how do we do that? And, there's amazing things happening in our community around food. And, there's a pilot going on right now with Amazon where it's actually being delivered to families in our community. And so just think about if we as a community could work these resources together, how we might actually be able to impact families where they are. And I think that that's a really important takeaway for everybody in this last year, is meeting people where they are and giving them what they need where they already are at. So with that, what is on everybody's mind? What's your takeaway from today? And what do you think we need to do to move forward in supporting moms in our communities? Liz, you talked a little bit about the Relief Act monies that are going to be coming into our city. If we could think boldly and the sky was the limit, what do we all think needs to happen for families, so that we might actually be able to Liz's point, be in a better place than where we started?
A great question. I think that, if we're talking about like an equity agenda for, a better normal for women, mothers in particular, I start with things like access to paid family leave. It should be universal, it should be unquestioned, and it should be generous. Because we as a community say that we care about babies, and we're working on infant mortality. Well, mothers are a part of that equation. That's really the beauty of what these other two women do, is that they focus on the mothers, they focus on the families, and that's how healthy babies can thrive. So I start with access to paid family leave as a major component of an equity agenda for parents, for mothers in particular. I think about universal access to high quality childcare, because you cannot participate in the economy without it, right? From a working person's perspective. But just from a child perspective and that healthy family relationship, your children their brains are developing before they're 5 at incredible rates. 90% of brain development completes before age 5. It lays that groundwork for all the learning that comes later. And so it is in everyone's interest to invest in those kids early. And that access to universal childcare doesn't just poof appear, right? It's people like Gina running these incredible centers, and the teachers at those centers. Let's stop thinking about childcare workers like they're babysitters. They are teachers, they are educators. They're doing some of the hardest educating that there is. And they need to be paid like educators and invested in. They're also often raising their own families, as Gina pointed out. And so I really think about those as two major pieces to really pursuing an equity agenda for mothers: universal access to paid family leave, universal access to high quality childcare. And those things are going to take big efforts. And it's beyond what just the city can do, but I know we're going to play our part. But I don't want to just pass the buck off onto others. And so I do want to mention a couple things that the city particularly is doing. Some of these big ideas. Not only do we have our sort of COVID response, like rent, utility, food assistance, right to recover, all of those things, including we also invested in our schools and technology, digital access, digital equity to help kind of more kids access the technology they needed to weather this last year and more. We're also doing something I'm really excited about. My office has partnered with the Columbus Women's Commission to work on a financial empowerment roadmap, to really, again, this idea that parents do know best. And if we invest in them, they're going to be able to invest in their families. So we have some financial navigators we've funded through the Legal Aid Society of Columbus and LSS 211 to provide free financial guidance and connection to these resources that organizations like Moms to Be and the Center for Healthy Families provides. You can actually, it's hard to get connected when you don't know how to get connected, right? So investing in navigators to help people do that. And then investing in counseling too. We've been chosen to implement a financial counseling agenda in the city of Columbus, and we've got grant funding from a national organization to do that. So basically the idea of financial counseling as a public service. So those are some of the ideas that I have that I think really move us forward as a community with the healthiest mothers and families.
I'm ready to jump right in with that quality childcare for universal access. Gina, I know that you think that you set us up for this, but let me tell you, the work that you do and the quality of care you provide is above all other. And I say that because sometimes our moms are frightened to leave their child with a provider that they don't know or someone they don't know. And the cost is expensive. And sometimes the hours don't meet the needs because maybe the mom's working second shift or third shift, or maybe it's the weekend, but they still need really great quality care. And then sometimes our moms who have special needs, they don't qualify for care because they're unable to work. And these are things that we've seen over time that the gap's getting bigger instead of smaller. So not only access, maybe an opportunity for the moms to go and learn alongside the teacher so that they can gain the trust to be able to leave their child. And then maybe respite care, because sometimes a mom just doesn't have a break or doesn't have the ability to go to a grocery store, or just because of mental health or emotional wellness needs, they just need a second to get themselves together. Could there be some respite care or some drop-in care that you don't have to be signed up all day, every day, because maybe that's too much, but something to get a break and just to get themselves together so that they can go on for another week. And I know we have to find a way to pay for these, and you can count me in. I'll do anything I can to try to help with that, but we have to work on it sooner rather than later because it's not going away. It just keeps getting bigger.
I agree with the wisdom that was shared by Elizabeth and Twinkle. Definitely having some different model for childcare that's even co-location where moms work. You know, like you said, within the communities where they live and work and live, you know, I think that is going to be a game changer. If I'm 18 years old about to graduate and I know my daughter is down the hall in a childcare room for her 1-year-old, I can study, I can do the things that I need to do. If I'm a mom and I work, you know, at the city, there's a childcare center in the basement, you know, and I could go have lunch with my baby or see him on video camera, or just those things that help moms continue on their day and be successful and not worry about what their child is doing or who's taking care of them. But also, like Elizabeth said, having an affordable wage for our childcare, they deserve $1 million. They're raising the future. And so really us valuing them more in the community so that we can pay them for what they're worth and they can continue to foster our children, you know, continuing with affordable housing. We know for people who may have income that they can afford housing, we're priced out even if we have a job, you know. So looking at affordable housing where everyone can afford to live there, there may be some subsidies, there may be some scholarships, there may be some, you know, I can't remember the word, a lock-in where it's $1,200 for the rest of my life versus it's gone up to $4,000, you know, like some cities in New York. But looking at some different housing models that are going to enable us all to be successful and live and work together is going to be key. And also looking at what are the other resources that we need to put in those communities, like we were talking about. Are those mentoring groups, you know, are those support groups, are there recreation, are there green spaces, just so we can continue to strive and thrive as a community. And just looking at what do we need. You know, we continue to have the conversation, invite people to the table, and inviting moms to the table for those listening sessions or having forums where they can share what they need. Because like Twinkle said, they'll tell you what they need. You know, can we give it to them? I think is important.
And I think, you know, all of you kind of brought up about the teachers, and I would be remiss if I did not say and recognize all of our amazing, wonderful teachers in our classrooms, especially too, because not only is this week the week of Mother's Day, but it also is Teacher Appreciation Week. So for anybody who may have forgotten that, you still have 4 days left in the week to get your favorite teacher some sort of recognition. But it is Teacher Appreciation Week, and today is actually National Teacher Day. So I think we would all be remiss to not give them a little round of applause for the work that they're doing in our community. So we do have, for the last about 10 minutes, we do have a question from the audience. And if there's anyone else in the audience that wants to send in some questions, we do have some time. So the first question from the audience is, how are we making sure that women do not get penalized after motherhood?
That's a great question. And we do hear like the motherhood penalty and the fatherhood bonus referred to, culturally, that women typically get, in terms of the wage gap, it's typically exacerbated for women, and men are often paid more when they're fathers, as some sort of breadwinning recognition, which is very outdated, if it ever even was true, because women more and more are key breadwinners in households, and often single breadwinners in households. So a couple of the things that we're working on in the city of Columbus to address the gender wage gap. I talked about the Columbus Women's Commission, some of the work I've done with them on financial empowerment, which, by the way, financial empowerment is a model for helping to address the motherhood penalty too. But in addition, a couple years ago now, I want to say 4 years ago, the Columbus Women's Commission created the Columbus Commitment, which is all about achieving pay equity. It's an employer-led pledge to share best practices for the goal of improving our community's overall gender and race-based wage gap, ultimately to achieve pay equity. And there really are things that companies can do to address this head on, because often things that are occurring that exacerbate the wage gap, it's not about some kind of illegal pay practice. It is just a legacy of unfairness in how we compensate women versus men, and how we think about the value of work. So you think about the value of the work provided by Gina as educators. You think about the value of the work provided by the home health aide who's caring for a senior, an older adult. And then you think about the value of more male-dominated industries like construction, right? And I get that buildings need to be built. That's really important. And there is a lot of skill it takes to build so that they don't come crashing around. But I also know that my grandmother needed really good care at the end of her life. And it was really important to me that the world did not come crashing around her, or that she did not meet premature health complications or death. And we relied on care work to help that happen. Right? So we have this notion that one kind of industry should be better compensated than another kind. And it's completely out of whack when you really get down to what's being provided and how do we value these things. So I digress a little bit, but just to say that we have to keep our eye on pay equity, and those things I was talking about with the equity agenda, I guess, that we could pursue for mothers, things like paid family leave and childcare. And gosh, Twinkle, I love that idea of investing in helping mothers, rest and recover. I mean, a mental health strategy, that is so important. Gold idea. Things like that actually helps prevent the motherhood penalty too. If we're preserving women's income through paid family leave and through access to affordable childcare, then we're preserving, their livelihoods, and in some cases their ability to advance their careers, et cetera, et cetera.
And before I get to the next question, Liz, I do want to call you out because I think you have set up really powerful examples for our community in regards to working moms, and how I really feel like you have just made it a seamless, integrated part of who you are. And so I say a kudos to you for having your baby with you on news broadcasts, and being at work functions, and being up at the podium at city council with your baby. I think those more normalized understandings and interactions of what it means and how we can illustrate working moms, I think is also super important to kind of level that playing field for everybody. So I do want to kind of just extend my gratitude towards you, because I think it makes a huge difference. And every time I see you do it, I'm like, I usually say some like expletive, like, damn, she's awesome, right? But I think I think that is what we need to see. So thank you for being brave enough for doing that.
Well, thank you. I just want to quickly, A, thank you for saying that. B, I do that when I don't have other childcare, and it is a luxury for me to be able to do it. You can't bring if you're a grocery store clerk, you can't bring your baby to work, right? So I recognize the privilege in me doing that. And I also hope it does invite a conversation like what you're talking about, Gina, that, seeing a baby with their mom makes you think, okay, women are three-dimensional people. We don't just like turn on like a computer when the workday starts and then turn off at the end. Like, we've got 24/7 responsibilities. And sometimes if we're going to show up, our kid's going to come with us. So I'm really glad that it can force the conversation. And you can bet I'm going to keep doing it. But I also do want to acknowledge so many women who don't have the option. And that's why all of these things we're talking about are just so critical.
Agreed.
Yeah, I think it's modeling for us, Elizabeth. Absolutely modeling for us what could be if we look at the different models of mothers and working. Is there a place where I can put my child if they are sick and I still have to come to work and be on city council? If I'm a director, is there a child care center where it's a drop in specifically, like we were talking about? It models what can be. So thank you.
Nichole, I do want to get to this question before we end, which I think we have about 1 or 2 minutes left. A question from the community is, are there any specific programs for teenage parents, especially when it comes to balancing education?
I think, well, I'll answer it in 2 ways. For us at the Center for Healthy Families, it is important that our young people get their high school graduation, get their high school diploma. We know that education is an equalizer. So as much as possible, we like parents, both male and female, to stay in school, because that is where their supports are. Their teachers, their principals, their friends, the socialization that they need. So when they continue that routine after they've delivered and can go on to have their babies, in childcare, work, and go to school, it helps them toward graduation. There are alternative programs. We are partnered with Columbus City Schools, where nurses and social workers identify those families who need support. And we do everything that is ethical and legal to make sure they graduate. So if I have to transport a child to school every day who's at the county line of Franklin County and another county, I will. Do we make sure we pick them up and get them to work? We will do those things because we want them to be successful. There are alternative programs that we have been working with, the life skills programs. There is Focus Learning Academy. I can go on and name all the organizations that we work with to make sure that kids stay in school, get their degree. Even if after they're 19 or 20, we still make sure that moms get their education and dads get their education. Because once we have that high school education, we can then apply for jobs that require it. And we know that if they don't have their high school diploma, it really boxes them out of even getting jobs that you would think, oh, no, it doesn't require a high school diploma. So that's the minimum. We work with Ohio State with their CHAMPS program. So if they are in school and want to go on a higher education, and they also have the Access Collaborative Program at Ohio State that also in surrounding areas for Columbus State, Franklin University, any university in Central Ohio that young moms and dads want to be attached to. And it may be that they don't want to go to college. There's workforce development programs that are requiring a high school diploma just to get in, either at Ohio Health or Chase Bank. So we have lots of partnerships where we're saying, let's get the high school diploma first, and then we can help you with what your next best is. If that's construction, if it's nursing, if it's, I want to do lashes and eyebrows or do cosmetology, that makes a lot of money. So let's help families get an education so that we can help them get to their next best in the workforce. So yes. Call us, please.
So in closing, I want to thank all of the panelists, Twinkle, Nichole, Councilmember and President Pro Tem Elizabeth Brown. Thank you to the United Way for hosting this conversation today. And we're hoping that if you have additional questions or if we've sparked something for you, please reach out to any of us. Also reach out to the United Way. And for additional programming with Leaders United, they do host a series, and you can visit the liveunitedcentralohio.org/Leaders United to check out for upcoming events. And I do want to offer a very, very special Happy Mother's Day to all three of you. I hope you have a wonderful celebration with your family this weekend, and hopefully it'll dry up and the weather will be nice too. So thank you everybody for being here with us today, and we look forward to anything that has been sparked in you today. Thank you.
Thank you. Happy Mother's Day.
Bye.
Hi, happy Mother's Day, everyone.